bush.
You're living it. My name's Chris Shortis and I am the Bowman, and I'm here to interview a couple of ladies, the locals in Kinglake. Now, I'm a resident of Wallen, so I'm not too far from Kinglake, and I remember that fateful day in February 7th, 2009, known as Black Saturday, where the temperatures were 46.4 degrees and winds blew up to 120 kilometres an hour. I actually was in Mount Disappointment 4 months prior to that fateful day, and I said to my mate when we were deer stalking that the fuel loading here is ridiculous, and if we light a fire here, it'll go off like a bomb. And unfortunately, on that day, there was a firestorm. Remember, Black Saturday cost the lives of 173 people. It destroyed over 2,000 homes. And I'm here to ask Lisa and her friend, what do they think is the main reason why our bushfires are so intense in this country? Lisa?
Well, I do believe the main reason is that there is not, that the governments have not really taken our Indigenous Australians serious. The main problem is our undergrowth. And on top of that, we've we've done nothing after Black Saturday. Because we're in a position again that if it happen again, will be exactly the same.
Well, before I came here, I drove through the national park and I went up to the memorial site of the Black Saturday, St Andrew's Point, and I noticed that the fuel loading around the place was absolutely ridiculous again. And a lot of the debris and fallen timbers as a result of the last fire, I don't see any of it being removed at all. And if a fire was to repeat under the same conditions again, I fear that the disaster would be very similar.
I totally agree. Now, we can do so much ourselves to clean our own properties, and I live on acreage. But what's the use of doing that if we have fire in the bush that's going to be out of control because of the amount of fuel underneath it because it's not there? It's not going to do a thing.
Yes.
Okay, especially with the conditions. This is where the weather has changed, and I do believe it has.
Yep.
You're having your own storms. You're having your own. It makes its own little hurricanes. They're things that we've never faced before, which it can actually blow debris a lot, or fires a lot further. How on earth are we going to be safe? There's no way you can save yourself. You've got to get out.
Regardless of your views on climate change, because I'm neither a skeptic nor I do not believe in the current narrative that CO2 is the problem. Because if we had it in concentrated forms, you'd be able to put the fire out, believe it or not. But my view is that the most immediate issue is land management. Now, my view on climate change, I studied this at university because I'm now a third-year university student, and I found some sources where that the removal of vegetation, natural vegetation from our continent in southwest Western Australia, actually over the last half a century or since Federation, the rainfall decreased by over 40%. And they calculated it up to 65% of that attributed to the clearing of the land itself. Now, my view is that we do a shocking job of land management, and regardless whether we've warmed the globe up 1-2 degrees or whatever, we simply neglect the elephant in the room, which is a fuel reduction strategy.
Absolutely.
It's not maintained adequately enough so that people have a route to get out if something happens.
Well, Rebecca, would you like to comment on that?
Around my house particularly, we had nature strips that aren't regularly cleared. So if something was to happen, there would be devastation. It would spread so much faster than if it wasn't maintained and kept up. My own father has to maintain the edges of our property because it's not done for us by the council or legislated by the government.
Now, I'm going to ask this question because I haven't actually checked these facts myself, but since you are residents here, isn't it true that shires such as Mitchell Shire could fine people for actually collecting firewood along areas which they deem that deserve protection.
Yes, I do believe that is true.
Yes.
So if you can't collect firewood, that obviously contributes to the actual fuel loading problem.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you can't cut trees that are close to the house.
Yep.
And I'm not saying, look, it's not because they're not beautiful, but I think you have to think of safety. You get leaves into the gutters, which
Yep.
creates more problems. Trees should be at a distance away from the house. That house can be saved.
Okay, let me ask you a salient question here. Now, we know that Black Saturday, the temperatures were 46.4 degrees. Prior to that, we had multiple days of over 40 degrees, and we had a very, very drastic dry spell, and then that fateful day happened. Now, if we entertain the climate change narrative and that the globe has become 2 degrees warmer as a consequence, do you believe if the temperatures were 44.4 degrees instead of 46.4 degrees would have made any difference to the outcome of that fire on Black Saturday?
Absolutely not. Actually, on Black Saturday, a few days before that, in Kinglake, our temperatures really varied. I mean, I was wearing a woolen jumper 2 days before on the way home.
Yep.
It's not as if it's hot. We're always a couple of degrees cooler.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with that.
Yep.
It's got to do with the fact that if a fire starts and it's in, a bush area, there's so much undergrowth that God helps, even today, after 11 years, with all the Royal Commission and everything, nothing's changed.
Nothing has been done to reduce our land litter.
I've taken a series of photos around that memorial site, St Andrew's Memorial Site, of the Black Saturday bushfires deliberately because when I drove up through there, I thought, haven't we learnt anything that, look, basic firefighter training teaches you that there are 3 elements to a fire, and one of them is heat, the other is oxygen, and the other is fuel.
Yep.
If you remove any of those factors, the fire will go out.
Correct.
So I would say, you can agree or disagree, you cannot have a mega fire unless you have mega fuel loading.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because if the temperature decides to be 44.6 degrees or
But it's clear.
48 degrees or it's windy, we
If
can't
there's
control
nothing to
those
burn,
elements.
it's
There's
not
nothing
gonna
to
spread.
burn.
No.
If we keep our properties clear,
Yeah.
okay, you might have a little grass fire.
Yeah.
But the bush is what is the problem because that's
Yes.
where the embers get thrown over
Yeah.
and that's where it creates its own temperature.
Yes.
Now, my only problem is that I'm sick and tired of all the talk when nothing happens. How on earth can we make a change?
Okay, can I make a suggestion on that? Because this is the reason why I'm seeking a university education. And I have a lot of options that I want to pursue after I graduate. I believe it is up to the electorate, right, to seek local representation on councils, maybe state representation through state government, and obviously if they want that federal government, they can enter into politics or join a lobby group to support someone who's keen to do it. For the reason why is for me, from a person who's considered right-wing politics, I believe the left are more passionate about their cause, and that's the reason why you have more leftist influence at a local government level, because they're more determined to push their agenda. Would that be an accurate statement?
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So I'm not going to be so anti-green that I don't agree with anything they say, because there are some
Yeah, I
points
do.
which are salient and relevant and we should listen.
That's right.
But at the same time, if you have an alternative point of view, particularly a point of view that is researched and that sort of thing, we need to take the next step and start taking control of local governments and start putting in our own agenda. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely.
Yes,
I mean, it comes down to people's safety, animal safety. Okay. I mean, this time I think the media has covered a lot more about animals
Yep.
dying. Luckily, people didn't. But then, hello.
Yep.
The difference between Black Saturday and the fires at the moment
Yep.
is the fact that they did learn that they're taking more action as trying to save lives and get people out. But they're actually telling people to leave.
Yeah.
We didn't even get a chance at that.
No,
It was
no.
so wrong from the start.
Yes.
Nothing was correct.
Yes.
Couldn't leave. We were all trapped up here.
Before
we
we,
were trapped.
before we conclude, I'd like to add a little bit of a different factor. I lived through Ash Wednesday because I'm old enough, being closer to 50 than I am 40. In 1983 we had Ash Wednesday, and one of the biggest things that have happened without the infrastructure to catch up with it is population growth.
Correct.
And a lot of these regional towns are saturated with the population, and in the event of a fire disaster where the fire moves demonically quickly, more people with the same size roads, we could have a potential disaster. Would that be accurate to make that claim?
Yes. That's where I think major changes have to take place. Rebecca may want to say something about this.
We want to live in the bush, but in order to do that, we need the roads and the sides of the roads and the bush area to be maintained in order to satisfy and be adequate enough for the population growth to occur if something were to happen. And that isn't being done, so it's creating problems when people are having to leave their houses and leave their properties in the event of an emergency.
I also would like to add on top of that a little bit more planning has to go into
Yes.
things
town
like
planning.
roads. Maybe they don't want to narrow the roads, but they've got to keep the trees back so that if they fall, we still can escape.
Yeah.
They've got to look into roads where you can get trapped. They've got to actually do spaces between the forests where it's clear, so that you're still not affecting the climate, but you've got an area that
can
is
get
a
on.
fire break and there's room for the animals to escape.
Yes.
Also, they have to have a safe area around the townships. Well, even that
Yeah.
on the subject, there is no safe haven in Kinglake at the moment.
We don't
After
have
Black
anywhere to go
Saturday,
to escape.
if there's a fire, nothing's happened. Why not clear around the town, have an area where it's safe for people to go and congregate?
Would part of that problem be is that councils are reluctant for people to take down what is native trees and vegetation?
I think that's one of the things, but the thing is, I think we have to live in the 21st century, and we've got to look at you get to the stage where you go as people that survived Black Saturday, we often talk and we go, every summer, do we have to live through this?
Yes.
Now, we're always on edge. We're really living the nightmare over and over again. I made a joke and said I might go to Alaska next summer just to get away from it. Now, we cannot leave, all right? We were the ones that created the so-called condition because of the fact that maybe as a society or as we've been a bit laid back, the governments have been too complacent, whatever. But now it's real. We can't leave this for the children of tomorrow. We have to do something. If it means chopping a few trees, so be it. We can plant more in places we need them.
Yes.
Definitely has to have management of land. And with the council, the governments, I don't care which party you belong to, it's a wake-up call.
It is,
Absolutely.
I agree. A wake-up call, and
And we're not going to take this.
no,
We've had enough.
No,
have,
no,
yeah.
and look, unfortunately, every Royal Commission has presented the same problem after every disaster, from Black Friday to Ash Wednesday to Black Saturday until
That's
now,
right.
and the same conclusion will be is fuel reduction strategy.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yes.
Do you really think we are putting the wrong people in position of power, or are we not making enough noise as a nation to wake them up? I've got no idea, but something's broken down somewhere.
My opinion, and people have a right to disagree to my opinion, my opinion is the government we have is the reflection of the overall electorate.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's got to change.
Because our constitution, our stated governance, actually gives you the right, and the High Court has actually ruled on it, implied political communication. That is that's actually your right, because implied political communication in this country is not a personal right, it is actually a restriction on government. So if you want to make noise and make political statements and actually back those political statements with research, with a political ideology, you are entitled to that in this country. And more people need to exercise their rights and bring this to a proper civilised debate. And there's another issue too. We've become so partisan in our politics,
Yep.
civility has been lost.
That's right.
And while no civility can exist, there is a greater chance that these problems will not be solved,
No.
or at least mitigated, because I don't think we'll ever be able to stop fires in the future.
No.
But I believe in this country, which has a history of fires, we can certainly reduce the impact by addressing the elephant in the room, and I
Correct.
believe the main cause is fuel reduction.
Absolutely, totally agree.
Okay.
I really do. I think back burning is essential, and putting animals back in high country.
Yes.
I'm sorry, that
Yes,
is
we need
the
the
most,
animals to go
even
back.
if they want to make revenue from that, go
Yep.
for it.
Yes.
Right? You know, it's got nothing to do with that. I think
And maybe put the revenue back into land clearing in other
absolutely,
ways. Getting,
you know, infrastructure of
Yeah.
towns, all that
Yeah.
stuff. Then they've got to start to actually address this differently. They just can't keep blaming the climate. It's got nothing to do with the climate.
Right.
If you're not doing anything to maintain the land itself. And that's
Exactly.
where it's failing.
Exactly, because I will maintain that man could have an impact on the climate, and I'm sure
We
man
do.
does through land management issues, but there are variables in the climate which we have no control over, so we need to take charge of the things which we do have control, and that is land management.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Ladies, I really appreciate your time. Look, I wanted to actually explore and speak to a few locals, particularly in an area which I think is very relevant, Kinglake, considering the Black Saturday bushfire disaster. And I hope that in the future that we can find solutions to what is becoming an increasingly a common problem.
I totally agree. Thank you very much.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.